It was 130 years ago, on February 21st of 1891, a train pulled into St. Louis to the old Union Depot here in the Mill Creek Yards. The city was pretty much shut down that day. People were dressed in mourning clothes, buildings were draped in black, and there were thousands of Civil War veterans, many in their old uniforms here, to pay their last respects to the man they called Uncle Billy. The body of General William Tecumsah Sherman was on that train, coming to be buried at Calvary Cemetery. He had died in New York at the age of 71, but St. Louis was his adopted home, even if he kept being pulled away. After the Civil War, he was back in St. Louis to command the U.S. Army west of the Mississippi, and friends helped him buy this imposing home, which is now gone. Sherman and his wife bought a family plot in Calvary Cemetery. For Sherman's funeral, the newspapers devoted pages of coverage to the events, the prominent guests who came to honor the man who, along with Lincoln and Grant, was considered one of the great heroes of the Civil War. His casket was on a caisson pulled by 4 black horses. It was followed by dignitaries and veterans marching behind, even some Confederate veterans. Crowds lined the streets to Calvary Cemetery. Sherman was not a religious man, but his wife was a devout Catholic. One of their sons became a priest and conducted the graveside services. His Civil War tactics, the march to the sea, they helped win the war, and they continue to be debated today. But 130 years ago, St. Louis said farewell to General Sherman. The Post-Dispatch said 10,000 people were here and called it the greatest funeral pageant ever seen in the West. Sherman is still remembered today on a much smaller scale. From our archives, Ruthie Zell's story on St. Louis's Sherman Day.
Right, face. Forward, march.
Were it not for the muskets firing, it might seem like a normal afternoon in Calvary Cemetery. But today is Sherman Day, and these soldiers are actually members of the national organization Sons of Union Veterans. The group is dedicated to preserving the history of soldiers who fought to preserve the Union during the Civil War.
Our organization realized that many of our ancestors fought under General Sherman. We called him Uncle Billy. And we have formed a Sons of Union Veterans camp here called the William T. Sherman Billy Yank Camp 65.
General William Tecumsah Sherman is perhaps best known for a military strategy that contributed to the surrender of the Southern Confederacy. He spent time in St. Louis off and on during his military career and worked for a brief period as president of St. Louis Railway, a streetcar company. After his retirement from the Army, General Sherman and his wife, Ellen, planned to live out their remaining years in St. Louis at their home on Garrison Avenue. Sherman bought burial plots for his wife and children in Calvary Cemetery. His final request before his death in 1891 was to be buried alongside them.
We found that the grave site was here, and it needed a little bit and everything. We came over and we painted the flagpole and trimmed some bushes, and the cemetery noticed we were doing that, and they're very, very cooperative.
Lieutenant Colonel Jack Grothe has overseen the Sherman Day ceremony for the past 31 years.
Thanks, guys, for coming out again.
His group, the Billy Yank Camp, is one of several hundred community-based divisions of the Sons of Union Veterans, responsible for maintaining grave sites and organizing events like the Sherman Day commemoration.
We have Doug Niemeyer from the Royal...
Actually, I've seen buses of school children coming to see Sherman's grave, so that's why we honor him.
Civil War veterans groups have been in existence since the early 20th century. As the veterans' ranks began to dwindle, their descendants carried on the operations to preserve their stories for future generations. In light of the 2011 sesquicentennial of the Civil War, the role of these groups and reenactors is even more important in raising awareness of Missouri's role in the conflict.
We keep alive the memory of the boys in blue. We are Mr. Lincoln's Army incarnate.
I think the children nowadays need to know, what all these men did for us.
And they tend to appreciate it more when they see it live in front of them rather
Right.
than seeing in the classroom. It's a lot more live for them and they become more involved with it.
It's just tremendous how much history there is here, and people just don't realize it. They walk right over it.
You doing all right? No? Well, you look marvelous.
Despite the camp's solemn responsibility to honor the history of the Civil War veterans, they still have fun dressing up in uniforms and firing cannons.
Well, the old expression about boys and their toys or hobbies. There's some Confederate reenactors here today. You are on your way to Minnesota to fight the Sioux.
I'm getting ready to be shot. They've already talked about shooting me.
So I couldn't help but noticing that you're slightly outnumbered here today. Is
That's a fact that we've gotten used to. We can't have the enemy without having the good guys.
These Confederate reenactors are not as out of place as they seem. History recalls that Confederate General Joseph Johnston, who led the resistance to Sherman's troops in the South, was actually one of the pallbearers at Sherman's funeral.
He had been a friend of Sherman's before the war and after the war, and that's how respected he was.
That concludes the program.
Sherman famously said, "War is hell." But on Sherman Day, war ends with smiles and photo ops before loading the cannon back into the truck and driving home. For Living St. Louis, I'm Ruth Ezel.